Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for assembling today. The first agenda item is called to order. The time is 10:29. We have all commissioners present as well, and we will begin. So please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, Republic which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on this special remote meeting of the Texas Alcoholic Beverage Commission. The coronavirus pandemic continues to be an extremely challenging time for all of us and for everyone specifically in the alcoholic beverage industry. This agency and the state as a whole, despite this, our operations can and must continue. TABC regulates more than 55,000 Texas businesses, all with ties to the alcoholic beverage industry. Tens of thousands of these businesses have been forced to shut their doors or greatly modify their ongoing business model due to the coronavirus. Many others have radically had to alter all of their operations just to stay afloat. This is a very serious issue. It's a very serious problem. And hundreds of thousands of industry employees have seen their jobs cut or their hours reduced because of the crisis. By any measure, Texans are hurting. That's why we're holding this special meeting. To the best of my knowledge, TABC is the only state agency whose governing board is meeting this month. And it's important to note that during this meeting, we're following all social distancing guidelines. We're holding the meeting online so that we only have a few people here in the chamber. We decided to hold a special commission meeting because the decisions we're making today cannot wait. They cannot wait till next month, and specifically because our industry needs help and we need help now. I would like to really thank my fellow commissioners who, through their own insistence, scheduled this meeting and basically decided that we should not wait until May. And so I applaud all the commissioners. Commissioner Boatwright, especially thank you for your guidance on that. And so I think it's important to also highlight that some of the steps that the TABC and the Governor of Texas, Governor Abbott, have taken to help the industry during this pandemic. Many of you are familiar with the temporary measures allowing mixed beverage permittees to sell alcohol for delivery and to go alongside food orders. You may also be aware that we've suspended penalties associated with retailers who are listed on the credit law delinquent list. We're also working directly with industry members who request assistance for deadlines, late reporting penalties, etc. And as TABC works to find ways to assist you, I'm proud to say that many industry members have already found ways to help their fellow Texans. More than a dozen distilleries have begun to produce much-needed hand sanitizer for Texas first responders and healthcare workers. A number of retailers are also innovating during the time of crisis, finding ways to adjust their operations to keep staff employed with alcohol deliveries and filling to-go orders. This crisis will come to an end at some point in the near future. Our lives and our businesses will be able to resume. Until that time, I want to tell each and every industry business owner, TABC is here to help you. Look, from the very beginning, from the time that at least certainly as long as I've been involved, and we have some industry members here specifically, and we have others on the phone, I've tried to make it a point that we are here to serve this industry. We're here to regulate this industry, but we're also here to serve it. You're not here to serve us. And so your input is vital. And, you know, sometimes those are friendly conversations, sometimes they're not. But we appreciate especially you guys that are here and those that are on the phone, we really appreciate your patience and your ideas. This is truly a collaboration. There's no right answer right now. So we are keen to hear what you have to say. And so that's specifically why it's so important that as an agency, we decided to have this meeting to hear from you all, to show that we walk the walk and talk the talk. And again, I'm going to say not everything that we say is going to be exactly what you want us to hear. There's statutory limitations. There are things that we just can't do. But we want to make sure that we are an open ear to all of you and that we're being as responsive as possible. And through this process and through this meeting, we want to hear you. And we want, you know, as we say, leave the bark on. And let us know how you're doing, because I think we know how you're doing and you're not doing great. So with that, I have my fellow commissioners online. And ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to share any comments, please do so now. All right. The next agenda item is approval of the commission meeting minutes of March 24th, 2020. I so move. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Marino. I have a second. We will now vote. Okay.
Commissioner Boatright, can you vote?
I can't. For some reason, when I click on approval of commission meeting minutes, I don't get the voting dialog box, but I do vote to approve the minutes from last meeting.
All right.
Thank
So,
you, sir. I will file that vote.
all right. So we have the minutes have been approved as written. Our votes have been recorded. The next agenda item will be briefings on the agency's temporary telework policy and employee safeguards for COVID-19. Director Fletcher.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Can you see me and hear me?
We can indeed. Thank you. Good morning.
All right, good morning, Chairman Lilly, Commissioners. Thank you for having me. I'm Amanda Fletcher. I'm the Director of Human Resources, and today I'll be updating you all on the agency's temporary telework policy and other safeguards put in place to protect our employees during this pandemic. Next slide, please. So beginning on March 13th, TABC implemented a new temporary telework policy, guidelines, and a request form in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. This was developed initially in anticipation of needing to transition our workforce to teleworking. And initially, employees' requests were based on telework needs for self-identified age or health risk factors, or based off of child or other dependent care needs. 1 week later, on March 19th, our executive director announced the TABC offices will be closed to the public after local officials began issuing and shelter-in-place orders. With the office closures, General Nettles also directed the expansion of telework in response to the public health disaster. Next slide, please. So to help you understand temporary telework policy utilization, let me first explain who it does not apply to. The employees who are already working in telecommuting arrangements under the previous policy are continuing to do so. This includes about 200 of our certified peace officers in enforcement and about 8 of our senior licensed employment specialists. Generally, the employees working in ports of entry are not able to telework because their job requires them to be physically at the booths to collect taxes. So together, enforcement and ports of entry equal about 55% of the workforce. So of the remaining workforce, there are 66% of that group of employees who are currently participating in temporary telework arrangements. Of course, the number teleworking on a given day fluctuates based off of the individual divisions. Some employees are able to telework on a full-time basis, while other employees are teleworking on an intermittent or rotating basis. Next slide. So that 66% of the remaining workforce amounts to 189 employees who have been approved given temporary telework arrangements. So HR is tracking the reasons why each of these employees are teleworking. The majority of them, 62%, are teleworking because of the directive for expanded telework in response to the public health disaster. 22% are teleworking due to child or dependent care issues, and 16% are teleworking due to their self-reported health risk or age factor. So as I mentioned earlier, the number of employees teleworking on a given day fluctuates. HR has been providing a daily personnel status report to our senior leaders beginning on March 23rd. This captures the number of employees physically working in offices on the reporting day, or the numbers in a teleworking status, or in an emergency leave or other leave status. Since the 23rd of March, the highest percent of teleworkers on a given day has been 57%, and on average, about 52% of our employees are teleworking daily. Next slide, please. So in anticipation of employees returning to the office, we've also developed a work questionnaire related to, or specifically for COVID-19. We're collaborating with other state agencies through the State Agency Coordinating Council, and I'm happy to say that TABC is one of 2 state agencies who have already implemented a questionnaire like this. We've tested it out with a handful of employees already. So we're leading this effort, and we expect other agencies to follow us. Its purpose is to evaluate risk associated with allowing an employee to return to the office, especially in the absence of a physician's release to return to work. Considering that doctors and employees may not be able to provide timely releases, and the fact that TDM and the CDC have advised agencies to be relaxed on requiring documentation from doctors, we feel like this questionnaire allows us to assess risk better. Employees authorized to telework and requesting to continue teleworking don't have to complete the questionnaire as long as they don't come into the workplace and have physical contact with another employee. So any employee returning to the office after temporary telework arrangement ends, or if they were off work for another reason related to COVID-19, will be required to complete this questionnaire in order to request to return to work. Employees will complete one of 3 sections based on their situation, and together the employee, leadership, and human resources will determine when the employee can safely return to the office. So there's 3 sections in the form. The first form an employee would complete if they've had a confirmed positive test. They've been confirmed based off of medical testing. The second section, section B, would be if an employee had experienced symptoms but did not have a positive test or was not able to get a test. And then the last one would be if an employee did not have any symptoms. So I'm happy to report that as of today, I'm not aware of any TABC employee who has received a positive test of COVID-19. There have been several employees who have experienced symptoms and sought medical diagnosis, but all results have come back negative so far. So the criteria that we use to assess an employee's ability to return to work after a suspected case or confirmed case of COVID-19 is established under the CDC Prevention Interim Guidance, where you recognize that this guidance often changes and will update this questionnaire accordingly. That's all that I have on this specific topic for telework. Do you guys have any questions? Okay, we can move on to the second section. Feel free to change the slide, please, Corinne. So I've talked about telework, but I want to talk about other safeguards that we put in place to protect our employees during this pandemic. So first, of course, we're operating with TABC physical offices closed to the public. The executive director made an announcement on March 19th, and beginning on March 20th, all of our offices have been closed to the public. We are, of course, promoting the CDC guidelines for social distancing and public health guidelines. Of course, social distancing, washing hands, stay home when they're sick. Very aware of the Travis County order issued yesterday extending the stay-at-home order and requiring individuals to wear face coverings in the public. Although this does not apply to state and local government, we have acquired limited amounts of personal protective equipment. Currently, we're using this for our frontline employees, but as we look to reopen our offices based off of local guidance, and employee safety will continue to be a priority. And so our CIPI team is preparing plans for reopening and distributing PPE when that opportunity arises. We've also enhanced our cleaning services. Most of our facilities are leased, and so we've reached out to the landlords and have asked for additional janitorial services in accordance with CDC sanitation guidelines. At a minimum, they're deep cleaning these facilities twice a week. Our mailroom, all of our mail has been redirected to headquarters since the local offices are closed. The mail, we're taking extra precautions by isolating for 48 hours. Once that 48 hours has passed, our employees are removing it and opening it with the protective gear. Any high priority or urgent mail and equipment that's being received is being sanitized before it's disseminated. And of course, our mail room staff are some of those frontline employees with the protective gear and wearing the masks. So other things that we're doing, of course, are maximizing our capability to have meetings virtually as we are now. We're encouraging all of our employees to not meet face-to-face whenever possible. And we've got several systems that allow us the capacity for this. We're using Skype, My Teams, and Zoom. We're also distributing personal and professional development and mental health information. Our HR team pushes out information from the employees' retirement system and our employee assistance program regularly. And we also have, we're preparing and compiling training and resource information for our employees to use while they're teleworking to help manage the transition to teleworking, but also to help cope with their mental health during this challenging period. Next slide, please. So of course, some of our, although our public offices are closed to the public, not all of our offices are closed to our employees. There has been one instance where we temporarily closed the El Paso office in an abundance of caution after an employee was experiencing symptoms of COVID-19. We closed that office to clean it and then reopened it. During that period, only one employee was unable to telework, so we gave one employee emergency leave from the 13th through the 17th in March. In Galveston, on the 23rd of March, the seaport closed for cruise lines, and so we ended up having to place 4 employees. They're part-time employees. They're currently on emergency leave and will remain on emergency leave until that port reopens. As I briefed earlier, TABC has expanded our temporary teleworking arrangements, and we've been operating under those for about a month now, and we've gotten good feedback that employees are, are able to accomplish things and are being productive. Finally, President Trump signed the Families First Coronavirus Response Act that went into effect April 1st, and the next slide will go into some more detail about that. So this is an act that went into effect April 1st, and it's set to expire on December 31st. We posted the required poster on our intranet for our employees on the 1st, and we're working with our legal and business services departments to determine how the law will apply to us and how it will be executed. So we'll be providing directors and employees with guidance very soon, but the bottom line is this act has 2 components to it. There's a paid emergency sick leave component, and there's an expanded family and medical leave. There are 6 qualifying reasons why an employee may be eligible for the paid sick leave, and they are reasons related to being confirmed positive with COVID, seeking a medical diagnosis, whatever the reason is. If it's for an employee's own medical condition, they would get 2 weeks of full. This is in addition to our current sick leave balances with the state. This is a brand new leave bucket for the employees. So essentially, if an employee is out for COVID reasons related to their own medical condition, they would get up to 2 weeks or 80 hours of paid leave. If they're out to care for another or who has COVID-19, or caring for their child when they're unable to telework because their school or childcare facility is closed, they would get up to 80 hours of pay, but only at the 2/3 rate of pay, not the full pay. The Expanded Family and Medical Leave Act creates a new FMLA event specifically related to an employee who is unable to work or telework because of COVID-related reasons related to childcare or closures. And so in that situation, an employee could get up to 10 weeks of paid leave at the 2/3 rate. So again, we're still trying to work through how we will be implementing this and how it applies to us, but this is something we're prepared to offer to our employees this month. That's all that I had on my agenda today. Do you guys have any questions?
No questions. Okay, thank you very much. The next agenda item will be a briefing on our Agents Academy safeguards. Obviously, a source of great pride is our Agent Academy, and General Salinas.
Good
You have
morning,
the floor,
Chairman
sir.
Ely. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Orlando Salinas, and I am the Training Director for the Training Division. First, I'd like to thank General Nettles, our HR directors, the Director of Law Enforcement and ITD. This last academy, as we were onboarding them, was truly a whole-of-agency approach. We all worked together to ensure we were able to make the mission happen. So I start off with a quick saying, and that is, with General Nettles' intent, it's clearly our intent to have mission first, people always. So with his guidance and intent, this first picture you see on this slide is on or about April the 6th at about 9 in the morning, where we had brought in 25 cadets to get onboarded. Given the mitigation strategies that we were put in place, they were placed in different classrooms, separated, and we did a lot of our work as briefed by Director Fletcher online via Teams and Zooms. We also met with them and issued them protective gloves, kept them separated to mitigate any opportunities of cross-contamination. We'll go to the next slide, sir. So as I get ready to the next slide so that there's no surprise, upon the end of my brief, I will excuse myself to continue to practice social distancing and will go work out of my office. So it's not to be rude, Mr. Chairman, it's with the director's intent to continue to practice our social distancing.
Understood.
On slide 12, some pictures I'd like to talk to, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, are you'll see for the first time, unprecedented, we actually had a commissioning ceremony on the 6th of April where General Nettles, via Zoom technology, and the cadets separated into different groups, did a swearing-in ceremony so that we would prevent any cross-contamination. So you can see in the middle slide, he's actually visiting and issuing the oath of office to all our cadets as they're standing up and taking their oaths of office. We were able to get them their equipment, such as their phones, their computers, their sidearms, their badges, their credentials, so that they would become able to add value as force multipliers for the agency. So it was a very successful operation on slide 12. So with your permission, we'll go on to slide number 13. The key salient takeaway points on slide number 13 is A, safeguard the cadets during the onboarding process, and of course, mitigate any cross-contamination or any contamination of the COVID-19. To do that, in keeping with the General's intent, we broke it down into 4 phases of this operation to ensure that we had communications with the cadets and continued them on a path and a glideway to get them fully commissioned and fully operational as soon as possible. Phase 1 was the shaping phase. General Nettles' guidance to me at the time was we saw this coming and we wanted to make sure that we had plans to communicate with our cadets, start talking with our cadets, onboarding our cadets. Phase 3 is the online education. Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to report that even as you and I are here today, we have 78 students, current field agents that are training right now on the new field training officer course via Teams. We also have 25 cadets that are this moment taking their LMS online courses for TCO credits. So we're making taking full advantage of our technology to continue our mission. And then we'll get to a phase 4 where we'll decide whether to go to an FTO program or to go to an academy. So I'll go over to slide 14 to go over the salient points. And this was really phase 1 of the operation. I started off by thanking our HR director, our law enforcement director, our ITT director. You can see on the left side of the chart that the first thing we did was start our communications with our cadets as quickly as possible, giving them as much information that they could do from their homes as they prepared to onboard. They also got an email, a welcome email from me with more instructions as to how we were going to do the onboarding process. And we also created a PT program. We modified PT programs, so not only were our agents starting to prepare the physical fitness piece of it, they also got instructions. So on the right-hand side of the chart there, you can see how we divided the cadets into 5 groups. We did this from where their home station was so that we could keep them divided as they were coming for the onboarding process to continue to mitigate any cross-contamination. We put each one of those groups under the tutelage of one of my training division sponsors, and you can see who sponsored which groups. And that was phase 1 of the operation that ended after we onboarded them in April. So I'll go to slide 15, which is phase 2, the actual onboarding when they actually showed up to Austin. You can see how we actually broke them down into those small groups of 6 to 7 cadets. You can see the information there, the equipment we tried to issue them so they'd be fully operational. Of course, issuing the gloves to continue the mitigation of the COVID-19. One of the things we also did, sir, was we put the cadets in individual rooms instead of doubling them up in an effort to continue the safety practices. On the right-hand side of the slide, sir, the salient point, sir, you can see what we did on Sunday. On Monday, of course, you saw the pictures of the general issuing their oaths of office. On Tuesday, even at the warehouse, we staggered them and kept them separated. Bottom line is we continued the social distancing and sanitation throughout the process. To date, none of our cadets have had any exposure to COVID-19, and we're real pleased with the way the phase 2 of the operation ran. So I'll go over, with your permission, to slide number 16. That's the slide that we're currently in, and I kind of briefed you a little bit about the 78 agents that are currently going through the FTO program and the 25 cadets going through the online learning. We're taking full advantage of our learning management system through Target Solution. We've created about an 80-hour online course curriculum. So the cadets are actually at their homes right now with the Surface Pros, logging on online. Every morning they check in with our sponsors in those groups that we previously discussed and going through a course of instruction to include some instruction from the HR, which is hostile work environment, sexual harassment. They also instructed the cadets to report to the nearest local office, so if there was any way they could be value-added or help as they continued their work, they would do so. Sir, it's important, since they were issued a sidearm from the agency, we've also put all our cadets through a qualifying, and we're continuing to do that so that they're operational. So I'll go to slide number 17 and discuss just some quick salient points on slide 17. On or about April 24th, we will make a decision. The reason we have 78 agents currently going through training, sir, is they're going through a updated field training officer curriculum. It is a 25-hour course. We're doing it over the course of a week from 8 to 12. That's currently happening. We did this in order to gain flexibility so that if a decision is that we can't host the academy right away, they're able to go into a FTO program. For our agents, it's actually a 25-hour training course that includes the new update to the legislative laws. For our cadets, it's a 9-week program in which they will be at their assigned duty stations, where they'll be going over how they do SOPs and processes within their duty stations. So at the last of this slide, on slide 17, decision for the academy. We have given the boss 5 contingency plans on how to do the academy. One plan stays to the original 11-week academy. The other 4 talk about a modified, shortened academy for 5 weeks, in which we're still able to get all the essential knowledge needed for our agents to ensure that we can continue our mission. Sir, subject to your questions on slide 18, that will conclude my briefing.
General, great job. You know, I think people don't always fully understand the importance of training, and that for our agents in the field, good habits, best practices, completing the mission all starts with the training process, which you know better probably than anybody. So I laud your efforts, General, and everything that you're doing. Fellow commissioners, do you have any questions for General Salinas?
No, thank you, General.
I don't have any questions, but I just have an overall statement. Listening to everything that the staff has done in this challenging time is really incredible. I applaud the TABC staff for being to think outside the box, to be flexible. This is a daily changing, there's daily changing rules and regulations that come down. So to be able to pivot on a dime and to come up with 5 contingency plans, as well as all the logistics behind keeping everyone safe and not having one COVID confirmed case throughout the agency is really outstanding. So I know we've got a couple of other slides to go through, and other departments will lean in and tell us what they're doing as well. So I just wanted to make sure that the staff knows that even though you're giving us a really small briefing, we know there is a ton of time that has gone into all of this. And so just really want to applaud all of your efforts.
Thank you, Commissioner Marino. Well said.
Sir, with your permission, I'll go ahead and excuse myself.
Thank you, General.
Thank you, sir.
All right, the next agenda item will be a briefing on COVID-19 Task Force, TABC's efforts to assist industry. Director Jared Staples, I believe, will be remotely reporting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, good morning. Hope you're doing well. I have an update for you on TABC's efforts to assist industry during the coronavirus pandemic. So next on slide 20, you can see that for more than a month, Texas has been dealing with the very real impacts of the coronavirus pandemic. In early March, there were a series of major event cancellations that created unique challenges for businesses, and this is what kicked off a round of industry requests for relief from the agency. And then within just a day of these events, Governor Abbott declared a state of disaster in Texas. And this proclamation gave TABC the tools it needed to assist industry when it mattered most. Just as the necessary social distancing orders were issued, which ended up closing bars and limiting restaurants to pick-up and delivery services. So throughout this timeline, TABC staff across all divisions have been working with industry, learning about how their businesses are impacted by this crisis and helping them navigate those obstacles. Next, on slide 21, based on our conversations with the industry, TABC immediately jumped to action, identifying several processes that TABC could amend so industry can operate in our new socially distant environment. We have expedited TABC's processing of applications for delivery permits. We're now allowing industry to submit applications by email as opposed to physically turning them into a TABC office. We're allowing applicants to print their own signs rather than going to an office to pick them up. We're also implementing a more socially distant process of confirming wholesale deliveries to retailers so that retailers are no longer signing their wholesalers' invoice in person during this time. Right now, we're not fining retailers who are late on their payments to their wholesaler. There are other requirements in place to ensure that proper transactions take place. We're not penalizing businesses that are delayed in submitting their excise tax reports and payments, but they still aren't exempt from making those submissions. We're also providing clarity for businesses that conduct direct sales with consumers on their ability to take orders and payments over the phone and the internet. And as you have mentioned earlier in the program, Mr. Chairman, as several businesses have jumped in to help produce hand sanitizer during this public health crisis, TABC has provided clarity on various laws and rules that apply. And next, on slide 22, aside from making some common sense changes to TABC processes, there are several state laws and TABC rules that impede businesses' ability to operate in a socially distant manner. So under Governor Abbott's leadership, we have been able to cut some regulatory red tape and provide relief to businesses that help keep their operations going. The governor suspended various laws so that businesses that got a temporary event permit for an event that was later canceled due to the coronavirus pandemic, they can now go and apply for a refund of their permit fees. Additionally, alcohol industry businesses that have distribution capabilities, they are now allowed to go repurchase surplus products from retailers that have extra product on hand due to event cancellations. And they can also provide retailers with use of their delivery vehicles in order to expedite the delivery of grocery supplies. And finally, the item that's, I think, garnered the most attention is that mixed beverage restaurants have been temporarily allowed to sell alcohol to customers for pickup with their food orders. And this is something that mirrors existing laws that currently allow restaurants to deliver alcohol. But as you can see on the right side of your screen, depicted in El Arroyo's Instagram post, all of these changes and temporary waivers are helping people keep their jobs. So this is just one of the many examples of the real impacts and results of these efforts. However, next on slide 23, we know there's still more work to do. TABC is committed to continuing working with the governor's office, with businesses, to provide meaningful relief that allows these businesses to continue their operations while complying with social distancing standards. And we plan on working hard to ensure that all businesses are aware of the options available to them, which will be highlighted in the next presentation. But I just want to close by saying, you know, we all may be shut in here for a bit, but TABC clearly isn't shut down, and we're still working hard every day to help businesses and protect Texans. And with that, I'll take any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Director Staples. Great job. You're on the front line right now with industry, and we appreciate all the work that you've done and your group. Commissioners, do you have any questions or comments for Director Staples? All right. Hearing none, the next agenda item will be a briefing on COVID-19 internal and external communication efforts from Director Black, who will be reporting in remotely. Director Black.
Well, thank you, Chairman Lilly and Commissioners. I very much appreciate the opportunity to provide this briefing to you on our communications efforts. As you can imagine, it's been very challenging around here, as it is across the entire world with this worldwide pandemic, but I can tell you your TABC team has definitely stepped up to the challenge. So let's start off on slide 25, please. In mid-March, we set up the COVID-19 comms response team, and the directive was to make sure we took an all-hands-on-deck approach. Providing information to industry and employees was our number one, our top priority. We had to be quick, must be accurate and credible, and our information must be consumable, easily understandable, which, as you can imagine, is very difficult when you're talking about the Alcoholic Beverage Code. Each day, I do have a conference call with the governor's office to understand the priorities and directions of the state, and I then brief the general and our deputy executive directors on exactly what took place in that briefing. In slide 26, you see our tools for getting our information out to our external stakeholders. We're using the TABC public website, targeted emails, videos, social media, and of course, handling media inquiries when they do come in. On slide 27, around a month ago, we launched the coronavirus information webpage. It contains the latest information for industry and the public. We post alerts, provides guidance on waivers, and as contact information so our stakeholders can get a hold of the employees in their region, which you can imagine is very important. On slide 28, I want to highlight our daily email. Each workday, we send out an email at the end of the day that provides resources and information that is useful to industry. We've received a ton of positive feedback on these emails, and industry seems very appreciative. Because of these emails, we've actually seen a 50% increase in those subscribing to our notification list. That is great news. That means stakeholders want this information and are signing up for it. And again, we send these out every single workday, which I think is important. On slide 29, we have created 5 videos for our industry stakeholders, And Chairman Lilly, we appreciate you taking the time and helping us with one of those videos, which was a message to industry on how we're here to help during the crisis. General Nettles has also delivered several messages to the industry through video. On slide 30 details a couple other videos we have done on Texas distilleries stepping up to make hand sanitizer and how TABC employees are working remotely and still providing top-notch customer service. On slide 31, we've been using social media to get our message out, and we've received more than 2,000 posts naming TABC. I want to direct you to slide 32. Our Twitter feed is doing very well. We've seen an increase in impressions, engagements, and a large number of jump in profile visits. So we're obviously very happy to see this growth. On slide 33, we've seen some of the media headlines out there. There's several stories that TABC have been mentioned in fact, more than 200 news stories. We're working hard to make sure our reporters know that we're a trustworthy source and they can reach out to us for the facts. We want to be that credible source for all the media out there. Slide 34 lays out what we're doing for internal communications. Of course, making sure our employees are informed is absolutely critical. Earlier, Amanda did a great job providing you context of all we're doing for employees. So it's important we communicate to them exactly what we are doing. And we do this through emails and videos. And one of the issues that is so important is making sure they have the correct guidance for industry stakeholders for when those stakeholders call them. So we send out information and we have a 3-step process when we do send out information. We send it to directors first, then to all employees, and then to our external stakeholders. That process is absolutely crucial. So we have a consistent and accurate message to provide our stakeholders. On slide 35, a call out, please follow us on Facebook and Twitter. This is an opportunity for you all to comment and share. We want to make sure that all our platforms are credible sources. So if you're not doing that, we ask the public and of course your commissioners, please like us out there as well. And to conclude on slide 36, a final message. We need everyone out there to stay safe, stay healthy, and we're going to do everything that we can to try to make sure that you are informed. So with that, I'll have any questions that you might have, but we appreciate all that you guys are doing for us as well.
Outstanding, Director Black, great job. The messaging is terrific. We use the term optics, how important that is, and the perception to the public from this agency, and you're doing an outstanding job, and kudos to you and your entire team. Commissioners, do you have any comments or questions?
Yeah, I've got just a comment. I wanted to thank the agency for these efforts. Certainly at our last commission meeting, there was a ton of unknowns. There was misinformation that was out there, and the way that you've been able to rally to be a single point of information has just been incredible. The way that you've approached this, it's been a huge change from our last meeting when, again, there was quite a bit of unknowns, and I think you can see it from just the comments so far. Last meeting, we had probably 100 comments by this point in time during the meeting with questions, and certainly now we've got a great source of information, the daily emails, everything that you're doing. So I applaud that and keep up the great work.
Thank you very much.
Commissioner Atkins. Well said, Commissioner Atkins. Thank you. Any other comments?
I'd just like to ask Brian one question. The daily emails that are going out, and I apologize if I'm supposed to go online and subscribe to them, but I would like to actually get them as well. And I don't know if the other commissioners are getting them, but that would be something that I'd like to at least get on the email list for, because there's definitely some things that were on there that I'd like to make sure that I'm abreast of. And of course, one thing that popped out was a San Antonio distillery that was making hand sanitizer. So do you happen to know the name of that distillery? I mean, if not, I'm happy to go online and look at the news story.
Right. I don't have that off the top of my head, but in the next few minutes, we'll get that to you and we'll email it to you immediately.
Wonderful. Thank you. I would like to reach out to them and give them a thank you.
Sure. And also, we'll make sure that you get on our email list. And for all the public out there, you can go to our website and sign up. But Commissioner Marino will make sure we get you on that list immediately.
Great. Thank you. Great work, by the way.
Get all the commissioners on there. We do a weekly summation of that goes to the commissioners related to the alcohol beverage industry. So all the commissioners should be getting our weekly, but we're happy to also include them on the daily. The daily includes all state agency information that we try to push out on behalf of the other agencies in the governor's office and public health issues. But I'd be happy to sign up all the commissioners for that.
Thank you, General. Thank you, Commissioner Marino. Any other comments before we move to the next phase? So I think we've heard some extraordinary testimonies today from the agency, and it is reflective of the leadership that General Nettles and his team have put forth. It's been a heroic effort and an unprecedented time for us, and so we're appreciative of everyone's effort in this regard. As everyone knows, or most people know, we are a bifurcated industry. That is that half of our industry is involved in law enforcement and public safety, and the other half is a regulatory body. As such, we have sort of a unique relationship with industry and believe that the collaboration with industry is essential for us to continue to operate at maximum efficiency and effectiveness and to ensure that the businesses are continuing, or at least in a position where they can continue to be vibrant, meaningful, and provide employment for our citizens. So with that, today we have sort of a unique opportunity, in that we've asked a number of leaders from the various industries that are represented in the alcohol beverage business to be here today, both personally and via teleconference. And so it's quite an honor, ladies and gentlemen, for all of you to take time out of your day to speak not only to us, but also to your fellow industry members about your respective businesses and industries. And so I will call upon each of you to address the commission, and whether you are here personally or via conference. So with that, I'd like to begin with Lance Lively, who is here, Executive Director of the Texas Package Store Association. So, Mr. Lively, welcome.
Thank you. I'll tell you, it's good to be here. It's good to be out of my house.
Yeah.
Wow. My name is Lance Lively. I'm the Executive Director of the Texas Package Stores Association, representing package stores in Texas for over 70 years now. I haven't done it for over 70 years. I've been with them for the last 12.
You look good for 90.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But a proud industry, a strong industry, and certainly one that is under fire right now with all of my brethren out there who are fighting this just like y'all are. So thank you for having me this morning. Briefly wanted to go over what we're experiencing in the package storage side of things and entertain questions as you have them. Before I get into that, just want to, before I forget, noticing all of the information that y'all are pushing out on the internet through your website, et cetera. We have a link to your page on our page and are pushing that information out to our members daily. We send reports to them frequently. Our open rate, like y'all's, is extremely high. So they're paying attention. We've even gotten a few members to join TPSA over the last 4 weeks, if for no other reason they want access to information quickly, efficiently, and we are able to provide that to them with your help. Having said that, the package store industry is not immune to the effects of this virus. We are, obviously you've seen around the state, there are some instances where sales are brisk. Our members are servicing their customers extremely well. But for those of our members who have heavily invested on the side of on-premise, we are seeing layoffs, furloughs. Many of our members on that side continue to employ people in warehouses that are, quite frankly, quiet and have no activity. So they are doing their best to keep people on the payroll through this, but we are not immune to the ill effects of this virus, I can assure you. Things are not all bright and rosy at all. In terms of attacking this problem head on, liquor store owners are taking every step available to them to be cautious about this, whether it be for their employees, their families, or their customers. We see social distancing, limits on the number of people that can enter the stores, as well as drive-through windows for those that have them. In addition to that, curbside service, and working with the agency quite closely on that issue so that our stores are able to take orders out to people's cars when they pull up. That has increased our labor cost, because understand when you go into a liquor store, you're providing the labor of selecting the products that you want. Now someone in the store is actually having to do that for you. So those labor costs are certainly up.
Yeah, same phenomenon is impacting the grocery industry as well.
Right, exactly. So it's again, we're working long hours and trying to serve our customers. Safety is priority one. We are doing everything that we can to make sure and ensure that our customers are safe, as well as our employees. So doing that as well. I would like to personally applaud the relationship that I have with this agency, as well as the governor's office. Both have been extremely attentive. I will tell you that from the agency standpoint, it is not uncommon for me to make calls to your staff at 10, 11 o'clock at night and have them pick up the phone and answer my questions. Liquor stores, as you know, close at 9 o'clock, and my phone rings a lot of times after that because they've been busy all day and they have questions, and we field those well into the night. It's interesting that there really are no more 7 days a week. Every day in my universe is Monday, just like yours. So we're constantly working and helping our package store owners get what they need, and y'all help in a timely fashion, so I truly do applaud the efforts of this agency, so thank you. I want to quickly mention that of 254 counties, all are doing everything that they can to ensure that we're open. We are considered an essential business under the CISA guidelines. We've had a couple of counties who have not chosen to participate in that effort, and I've shared those concerns with those counties with your staff, and we're trying to address those and get those stores open, particularly in Starr County and Val Verde County are the two counties that we're experiencing problems with right now. So again, thank you for all that you're doing. I know you're going to hear from my counterparts with other segments of the industry, and I look forward to working with every one of them and have been on the phone with almost all of them over the last 4 weeks extensively, and will continue to do that. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Commissioners, do you have any questions for Mr. Lively? Hearing none, I have one quick question, and that is increased labor cost, obviously due to curbside. What about through the drive-through? So if you're going through a drive-through window, someone in the store then has to take your selection, package it, present it to the window operator. So that's two additional persons that have to be involved in the process, whereby before that was kind of self-directed.
Right.
So that's...
No, absolutely. It affects drive-through just like it does curbside. You know, as I mentioned, our employees are the ones that are having to pull those orders for people as they phone them in or pull up to a drive-through. Probably double the work on a drive-through because, to your point, you do have somebody working the actual window and then someone pulling the orders in the stores. But, you know, again, we're doing the best we can under the circumstances.
And so if you're not equipped with a drive-through, then you're sort of in trouble, aren't you?
Well, you are. I got a call from one of our members in Val Verde County yesterday. He was allowing one person in the store at a time. He does not have a drive-through. He cannot get his curbside service down efficiently enough because the machine's inside, the car's outside, and going back and forth, and the sheriff's department down there cited him and gave him a ticket on Saturday for being open and allowing one person in his store at a time. So that's the kind of craziness that we see. Most of our partners who are working and having curbside delivery are doing so as efficiently as they can, but it's not uncommon to see managers of stores running orders out to people's cars to set those up. So not all of our members have drive-throughs, so the ones that are doing curbside are doing the best they can to make sure they're doing it legally, efficiently, and taking care of folks safely.
Well, thank you. You do a great job representing your folks, so we appreciate your support, and we wish you luck.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me today.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
This is Boatwright. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Via video conference, we next have Rick Donnelly, who is president of the Beer Alliance of Texas. Mr. Donnelly, you have the floor.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. I hope this meeting finds each of you and the staff safe and healthy. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you this morning as we all try and navigate the issues that this unprecedented crisis has presented us. First, on behalf of the distributor members of the Beer Alliance, let me thank General Nettles and the entire TABC staff for their remarkable response to the industry in what I imagine are not only trying times dealing with inquiries from the industry and public, but also in their own personal lives. We really appreciate their dedication and service to the industry and to the state. As are all Texans, we are trying to observe all of the new guidance that health experts are giving us, such as stay at home, work from home, and social distancing. We are, however, considered essential businesses as beverage distributors, and we are taking that responsibility seriously as we are trying to keep the off-premise sector with a steady supply stream. The one issue, however, that is utmost on our minds is the issue that is growing by the day, and that is the issue of out-of-code malt beverage products. The off-premise retail segment numbers literally thousands of locations and contains many millions of dollars worth of malt beverage products. These products are perishable and are deemed unsaleable by our manufacturers. And we need the flexibility to sweep the on-premise marketplace and replace these products with fresh, high-quality products that our retail partners and the ultimate consumers have always enjoyed. We have presented the staff with a very detailed process by which we would like to institute to accomplish this goal. The staff is working diligently to address this issue, and I think they will give us the necessary guidance we seek in the very near future. The staff wants to be careful of making sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, and we concur with that. Once again, the staff has been tremendous as we try and deal with this temporary.
We've lost audio. Rick, you might have muted yourself, or we've lost.
Yeah, I don't know how that happened. I don't know.
Okay,
how
we're
that
back.
happened. I apologize.
We're back. No worries, we're back.
But in closing, I just want to say the staff, especially the marketing practice division, has been just done yeoman work because like Lance, we have called at all odd hours with questions from our members, and we really appreciate the cooperation of this agency. If there's a better agency in this state, I'm not aware of it. And thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to be brief, and I'll be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. Commissioners, do you have any questions for him?
No, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Rick, well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Next here in the office, we have Tom Spillman, Executive Vice President of the Wholesale Beer Distributors of Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Tom Spillman, and I'm the President of the Wholesale Beer Distributors of Texas. And before I begin, let me just say that since all this started roughly around February the 13th, I've been in constant contact with many of your management staff, multiple conversations with General Nettles and Matt Chaplin, Dexter Jones, Jared Staples, Nick Raymond, Thomas Graham. Heck, I think I've talked to Thomas pretty much every single day since this whole stuff started, and on a lot of weekends as well. So I really appreciate them taking my calls. And I can tell you that in my 28 years of representing WBDT, I have never dealt with a more competent and professional group of people. They've been a real delight to work with. They're second to none, and my opinion goes back many years with some of these folks, but with the addition of General Nettles and Matt Chaplin and their leadership, the TABC is like Rick said, is second to none. The agency is operating on all cylinders like I've never seen it before, and the responsiveness has been fantastic. So, is that kind of how you drew it up for me to say? You know? Unfortunately,
Don't lose your script.
Well, that wasn't on the script. Unfortunately, they don't always agree with my opinions or my suggestions. That's not that often, and when that happens, of course, they are wrong. But no, they've been a real pleasure to deal with and complete professionals. The distribution tier has basically been turned upside down, just like everybody else in this industry. And on Saturday, March 15th, I received a phone call from the governor's office asking our members if we would be willing to assist our partners in the retail tier to help them deliver groceries and other essential items to their stores, not including beer. That's something separate that the governor created a special order for. And of course I agreed, knowing that my members would be willing to help their partners and basically the members where they live, the community members. So almost immediately, approximately 1/3 of our customers were shut down and adjustments had to be made on the fly. This is something that none of us have ever had to deal with, starting with widespread health precautions, obviously. And where do you start something like that? Obviously, you try to create a safe workplace for your employees to begin with. You know, going in and completely cleaning and disinfecting massive warehouses and offices and vehicles, trucks, all your equipment, instilling best practices for all healthcare and procedures on reporting. How do you report when one of your employees comes in contact with somebody that's suspected of having the COVID-19 virus? So all of this stuff had to be put in place in a very rapid order. Obviously demanding social distancing, mandatory mask and gloves for all employees, just the simple stuff that everybody would think would be normal operating procedure, and limiting contact with others. But how do you do that in the business that we're in? I mean, we're in the people business, we're in the relationship business, we're in coming in contact with multiple retailers every day. So something had to be done. What do you do with all your employees that are strictly on-premise employees? To my knowledge, none of the WBDT members have furloughed or laid off a single employee. They just repurposed them. They reassign them. Most of the on-premise employees have been directed to assist the off-premise groups, which leads to less contact, making fewer contacts with the retailer by each employee. Reduce the number of times that employees visit an account. Say maybe they visit an account 3 times a week, maybe they cut it down to 1. Some accounts require multiple visits a day. That has all been cut back to safeguard not only our employees, but also our customers' employees. Many of the distributors have instructed many of their employees to not even show up to the warehouse to begin their day. That can be done with salesmen, merchandisers, marketing folks, just keeping people away from other folks as much as possible. Obviously conducting meetings by Skype and GoToMeetings, that sort of thing. You know, they have daily meetings that they just don't have anymore. They just do it in a different manner. Some have gone so far as to create a list of local restaurants, local suppliers that are down and out of their luck, and supplying breakfast and lunch to a different retailer every single day. Not only for a cash infusion for those partners, but also to keep their employees from leaving the facility and coming back and being in contact with others. We are acutely aware of the pain being felt by our friends in the on-premise sector. And in addition to operating our daily business, many distributors are rerouting refrigerated trucks for food drives, donating tens of thousands of dollars to feed furloughed hospitality workers, donating non-alcoholic products such as water, coffee, energy drinks to their area hospitals. The list goes on and on. The WBDT and its members just recently donated $60,000 to the Texas Restaurant Relief Fund. We continue to try to help and prop up our partners in this business. We recognize that, the unprecedented crisis for the industry. We have worked with your staff, the governor's office, to allow replacement of certain affected products and certain affected businesses, like Rick stated. And with that being said, I see, kind of a long, drawn-out recovery process through all this. We're going to have some of our retailer partners that are just not going to come back and open up for business, but the ones that do, we're going to obviously continue to assist them and try to, as Rick said, clean up the expired products that are going to be in the market. There's hundreds of millions of dollars that are out there right now. But the good news is the distributors in this state know exactly where every single case is, and they know which retailers that they need to attack first. And once we get the directive from your staff and the governor's staff, we will start that process, and hopefully we'll all get through this together. Now more than ever, we're all seeing that the value of this regulatory system that we operate under, and our collaboration with your staff and the rest of the industry is more important now than it ever has been. And so with that, I'd be happy to answer any of your questions, and thank you for everything that y'all been doing to kind of prop this whole thing up and keep us going.
Yeah, I have one question. You had mentioned that, and we've realized the flaws in modeling through this process. That modeling is not an exact science. But do you have a sense? You've said you've not furloughed or laid off anyone in your specific sector. Do you have a sense of how much longer they can go?
Well, I think the tough part is ahead. All segments of the industry are going to take a hit. There's no question about that. We're going to be going out and working with not only our retail partners, but also our manufacturing partners. Everybody's going to end up having to take some hits on this stuff. Like I said, and Rick said, there's $100 million of product out there that's going to end up going bad because it's a perishable product.
Right.
So we're going to do our due diligence to go in and make the restaurant side, the on-premise side, as whole as we possibly can, and work with our manufacturing partners to help out with our side of it. Our people are in to stay. I mean, I can't imagine. We've got several of our members that have been in business since the repeal of Prohibition. Fifth generation families that, they do what they do. They give and they give, and they're going to continue to give. So I don't see any of our people going out of business, but everybody's going to be hurt. No question about it.
Right. Thank you. Commissioners, do you have any other any comments or questions for Mr. Spillman? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Best of luck.
Thank you for coming and talking to us.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Next, by video conference, we have Mr. Vic Brooks, Vice President of Republic National Distributing Company in Austin. So, Mr. Brooks, welcome.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, thank you so much. My name is Vic Brooks. I'm the Vice President of Republic National Distributing Company. I sincerely appreciate the opportunity to share some information with you today, and I want to thank you for your time and for this meeting. I've enjoyed serving this company and being in the industry for 42 years. Republic National is headquartered in Dallas, Texas for sales and Atlanta, Georgia for operations. We've been in continuous operation for 81 years, and we now operate in 33 states, Texas, of course, being the best. I'm going to echo some of what Jared said. There's a lot of points that he brought up that are going on in the market, and we really appreciate your help with this, Jared. Thank you. During this worldwide crisis, we're experiencing dramatic upheaval. As you know, many of our on-premise customers are having difficulty financially with the stay-at-home order, causing many closures of restaurants, hotels, clubs, bars, and public entertainment facilities. And with that happening, it was nice to see that the TABC Governor's Office quickly responded to the issue with the curbside food delivery executive order and authorizing alcoholic beverages to go in original manufacturer sealed bottles. The agency also allowed product repurchases on major events canceled due to COVID-19, such as the Houston Rodeo, South by Southwest, and that's just to name a few. Another way the agency has been supported is by allowing product delivery drivers to leave a copy of the invoice and not require a signature. This keeps both the retailer and our delivery employees safe by social distancing. One big thing that really happened was some of our valued suppliers were gracious enough to convert their facilities with their capabilities to produce much needed hand sanitizers for the public and our associates on the front lines and retail stores. The agency quickly responded with some guidelines granting authority and allowed this to be done, and we are so grateful for that. Another important thing that happened was allowing the wholesale tier to donate to the struggling industry service people through the TRA 501c3. A little bit about our R&DC associates. We're experiencing tremendous change in the way we are conducting essential business. Many associates are working from home for the first time ever, but contribute every day in keeping our business moving forward and responding to our customers' needs. R&DC has instituted a product or problem with Hero Pay and our frontline associates. And Hero Pay is a little extra added to each one's paycheck, and that's our warehouse people, drivers, frontline managers, and our sales associates in the retail stores. And trust me, I've seen it firsthand. These people are all really heroes. All of our associates are wearing masks, gloves, and have been provided hand sanitizer for their protection. Our business transactions are not normally suited for this arrangement, but we have adapted and will continue to do so as the market and business continues to change. There's so many things we don't know. We're playing the best we can. I'm grateful for your interest and efforts to keep this business climate in our state strong. The TABC works hard every day, and we cannot thank you enough for your dedication. I hope you and your families are all well and your associates at TABC are healthy and safe. We deeply appreciate your continued good work at your agency, and we know we will return to usual business practice stronger than ever as soon as safely possible. Thank you, and I really appreciate your time very much.
Mr. Brooks, thank you for joining us. Thank you for that testimony. Commissioners, do you have any comments or questions for Mr. Brooks?
I just wanted
Thank
to,
you.
Mr. Brooks, I just want to say thank you. I love the ingenuity of calling it Hero Pay because I think we talk a lot about essential workers these days and rightly so, medical and emergency personnel. There's so many people working across the state and they're heroes as well. So I applaud you and your industry for coming up with that term and implementing it. So thank you very much.
Mr. Marino, I appreciate that. I have been out in the stores and seen these people. It's really amazing what they're doing.
Thank you, Commissioner Marino. Any other comments for Mr. Brooks? Well done. Okay, thank you, sir. We appreciate your time. Next, we have Mr. Alan Steen, Vice President of Government Affairs, Central Region, Southern Glaciers Wine and Spirits of America, and former TABC Executive Director. He is joining us via video conference. Mr. Steen.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, commissioners, and thank you all for having me. And glad to be here and glad to be in front of you today. Just to add a little bit to Vic's comments is, by the way, I manage government affairs for Southern Glaciers for 20 states nationwide. We do business in 44 states. And so I get to compare Texas to 19 other states nationally and how you guys do business. And it's absolutely amazing. I'll speak to it here in just a second. But the effects on our company to date, we're looking towards the long haul. This is going to be around for a long time. And similar to what Tom mentioned earlier, is this is going to be around for all of 2020. and maybe even into 2021. And the changes that we've made to, to lock into that long-term change in how we do business are things like screening our employees before they, are allowed in our facilities. We've altered our shifts statewide, or nationwide, so that we're able to spread out a little bit and not be so close together. We've instituted stop and drop so that we're not, up in our customers' space. We're sanitizing our vehicles and those facilities around the clock. We've adjusted our merchandising to less crowded times of the day. We've used some of the data that we have to measure when certain outlets are the busiest, and we try to avoid those. We've got a 10 to 20 foot drop radius range where we drop within that 20 foot to stay away from people. Adjusted the signature policy, and but we've also developed a pretty cool deal that I'd encourage you to visit if you can. It's coronavirus at Southern Glacier, or sgws.com. It's a great resource for our customers, our employees, our owners, everyone to go and see what resources are available, how those are affected, good practices, safe practices, all of that. So that's some of the things that we've done. As far as looking to the future, we feel like that it could be a while before things do get back to normal. When they do get back to normal, we see only 70% of the businesses that are affected by this coming out of it in a positive way. And so we're planning for that and planning for a really, really long period of time before we can maybe get things back to normal. One thing that we do want to do is to sing the praises of those who initiated and advocated for Senate Bill 1450. And we see today that that's a lifeline that is going to be good for a lot of folks. And of course, our thanks to Governor Abbott, who altered that quickly. I'm sure at you and your team's urging. As far as the national implications that it has towards our company and narrowing that down to Texas, we have 140,000 on-premise businesses that are affected in our business today. That's roughly 60% of our customer base. And to date, we only have 4% of our on-premise accounts that are active in ordering from us, and only 2% of the case count in that. So essentially, 60% of our business is 98% down effective today. Clearly, that decline is going to affect the number of cases, but it's also going to affect how we make decisions going forward with employees, with contractors, with infrastructure change and improvements, and things like that. In Texas, we see about 2,500 of the 15,000 on-premise retail outlets out there today who are actually hanging on to that. And we calculate that about 20% of their usual revenue is where they're operating today. There is a bright spot, and some of that is we see Tex-Mex with margaritas to go in the Senate Bill 1450 requirements as being very positive. And some are actually able to move into a positive way there to keep their employees going. One thing that we're noticing too is I'm sure all of you have seen or heard or read about initial sales that were really huge. We've seen that stockpiling begin to stop or level off and adjust to the new normals that we're starting to see today in our everyday lives. As far as the direct personnel matters for our company is we've instituted our hiring freeze. We've eliminated all of our temporary or contract labor, and we've cut all of our non-critical capital expenditures as well as any discretionary spending for the foreseeable future. We don't even know how long that's going to be in front of us. Additionally, we've begun to focus reducing other costs throughout our organization, like travel and things like that. And then the last thing that I would say, when the general talked to me, wanted to know what, you could do and what the decisions that you've made and the direction that you've given have mitigated the blows for a lot of Texans. And the three-tier system that we have out there in the network that Tom mentioned earlier, it really works. But in order for it to work, it takes great leadership. And to your point earlier, the balance between public safety and regulatory affairs is a very complicated and difficult balance. And the way that you guys have chosen to manage that is flat unbelievable. And the last thing that I would leave you with is I'd encourage you to continue to operate with your open door attitude and your can-do attitude. And it means countless hours, but it also means frustration beyond belief. And we all understand that frustration. But we appreciate your efforts and we encourage you to continue forward. And with that, I'd be glad to try and answer your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Steen. I just for the sake of public clarification, I wondered if I could ask you about some of the numbers. So you'd mentioned that 140,000 businesses, only 2% are active, which means that, I guess by my math, that's about 137,000 that are not active. Are they not active because they do not have the means to provide to-go orders? They've just simply shut down? Can you expand on that briefly?
Yes, I can, Commissioner. Thank you for that. And keep in mind that 140,000 number is nationally, all right? And so what you have some states who don't have the pleasure of Senate Bill 1450, where delivery, curbside, and all of those are not options for some of those states.
So consequently, the governor's proactive action has taken at least that burden away from many of your Texas customers. So thank you for that clarification.
Yes, sir.
Commissioners, do you have any questions for Mr. Steen?
Just to follow up on that, because I think you make a great point, Chairman Lilly, is that if nationally it's only 2%, what I also heard from your numbers, Mr. Steen, is that 2,500 of 15,000 in Texas are still operating right now, meaning that nationally only 2%, but here in Texas 17% are still operating, which is a huge difference. So while we'd love to be at 100%, it seems that we are far ahead of the national average as far as those in the industry that are able to operate at this point in time.
Exactly my point, Commissioner. And I didn't get to attend Texas A&M, so my math is not as good as yours.
I'm a TCU grad. I'm a horned frog.
Do Aggies know how to do math?
For sure.
Well, they're mostly engineers, so I guess so.
You're exactly right.
Getting a little ornery up in here.
Yeah, well, we need, Commissioner Marino, we just need just a bit of levity in this otherwise incredibly serious meeting, but thank you. Mr. Steen, we really appreciate, you've obviously been in this industry for a long time. You've been a successful regulator with this agency, and the expertise that you bring to glaziers and to the industry itself is well noted and appreciated.
Thanks, sir. I appreciate you.
Next, we have Mr. Paul Bonarigo, past president of Texas Wine Grape Growers Association, and I would add that the Bonarigo family has been active in this industry for at least a number of generations. So, sir, we're grateful that you're taking the time to join us via video conference. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman and Commissioners, for having me. As said, my name is Paul Bonarigo. I am the past president of the Texas Wine and Grape Growers Association, as well as the owner and winemaker at Messina. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about our industry and how this is affecting us. I wanted to start off by just saying, first of all, as others have, that the TABC has done a tremendous job of being very responsive. Specific props to Jared. Pretty much every single time I've contacted him, he's been very responsive in being able to help communicate what assets and resources are available to our members and to our industry on how we can how we can proceed, as well as the Texas Restaurant Association has been very helpful to us as well. Much of our business actually aligns very closely with the restaurants of the state, and we do work very closely with our distributor partners, with our restaurants, with stores, but our business models are actually a little bit about what wineries are. Texas wineries are, we're farmers, we grow our grapes, we're manufacturers, we produce the wine, and then of course on the sales side, only about 2% of wineries in the state of Texas are blessed enough to be sustainable with only their wholesale sales. So the rest of those wineries are very reliant on the hospitality end of the business. And so that's pretty much what we are. We are a hospitality business. And so this COVID-19 has been absolutely catastrophic to our industry. A lot of things have been put into play to try to mitigate some of the impacts, and I'll talk about those. But just to give you some stats, based upon the feedback that we've been given from wineries throughout the state, is on average, we're experiencing about an 80% loss in revenue currently. And, obviously there have been things put into place like virtual things, and we're fortunate to be able to ship. And we're also fortunate that the curbside operation has been somewhat successful, but even with those factors in place, we're still experiencing about 80% loss. Over 40% of wineries have reported some level of staff reduction, whether that's furloughs or layoffs or just basically significant reduction in hours. I foresee that becoming a lot worse as these lockdowns continue and become a little bit tighter. So that's obviously a major deal that affects our staff. In terms of winery health long-term, we're looking right now at probably about 10% of wineries closing permanently is our current estimate. That's assuming that we come out of lockdown in May at some point. Past that, it obviously can get worse. Something that's also really important to understand about wineries is that we kind of look at this situation in three phases. The current phase is obviously we're experiencing a significant economic impact. There's a lot of health concerns, so we're putting in places to be able to make sure that our customers and our staff are taken care of. The next phase is harvest for us, and we're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. We're losing the money that we need to pay for our grapes in July through September. So harvest is right around the corner for us. So we're going to come out of the lockdowns and then enter into our harvest period. And so that's a major concern for us. Cash flow is a major problem there. And then of course after that, the next phase is, what does this look like after the lockdowns are all released and we're into the end of 2020 and into 2021? What is the buying habits of our customers? So, we're having to adapt and change our business models to be able to make sure that we are doing the best we can to keep our businesses viable. And some of that strategy is going to be really shifting to a lot more DTC, e-commerce, virtual tastings, but also working with restaurant and retailing partners to really push more Texas wine into the marketplace. Because right now, not a whole lot of Texas wine as a is sold actually in the market. Most of it's sold through those tasting rooms. So that's kind of the current impacts. What we foresee that the things that have been put in place, like I mentioned, a lot of that virtual realm controls. On the winery side, we are trying to stay as close as possible to safety protocols in terms of wearing masks and social distancing and sanitation, much of the same things that were put in place immediately for restaurants, wineries, followed the same type of considerations. On the manufacturing side, most wineries have really put in very tight controls for their manufacturing to be able to make sure that staff are safe as they're still producing the wine, because like I mentioned, harvest is right around the corner, so we have to still empty the tanks in order to be able to bring in all the fruit to process here in the next few months. So it's not really an option for us to shut down operation on the production side. So it is very fortunate that we have been made an essential service and allowed to be able to continue that operation. So that's very important. Some things that we have been looking at and that have been helpful. Obviously, the TABC's flexibility in being flexible, lenient with the excise tax payments, other payments has been greatly beneficial. We appreciate that greatly. Perhaps maybe even going as far as just having a suspension of some of those payments would be helpful for excise tax purposes, for license renewals, things like that. Anything that's cash out of hand for wineries is very detrimental to them right now because cash flow is so challenging. And another thing that's maybe a little out of the box, but anything that we can do as an industry, and this would affect Texas brewers and Texas distillers, anything that we can do to incentivize, or maybe that's a bad word, but give some sort of tax rebate or grant type program to restaurants and stores that are selling product produced in the state of Texas. I know that that's kind of a sticky wicket, but anything that we can do to help that to happen, I think will also be very beneficial long-term for our manufacturers and our farmers, because it's a big vertical industry, and any help is appreciated. With that, that's all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Paul, I had the pleasure of meeting you, as maybe you recall, at Texas A&M when we had the industry roundtable. And I said a statement that, as Texans, we have huge goals. And I've said the same thing to Mike, that obviously one day we'd like to be able to surpass California and Washington in the production of wines, just like we'd like to surpass Kentucky on the production of bourbons and other spirits. So it's well noted how difficult this has been for your industry. I do have, Paul, one question that I didn't quite get, and that you said only 2% of the wine growers can exist off direct sales, therefore 98% is affected, resulting in an 80% loss of revenues. Can you expand on that just very briefly, on the 2% number?
Yes, so there are over 500 wineries in the state, and there's only about, somewhere between 10 wineries in the state of Texas that are so heavily wholesale sales, so they sell to distributors and to stores. There are probably about 40 wineries, maybe 50, that sell to in the wholesale world, maybe even a touch more than that, but most of them, that's a small portion of their overall revenues. I mean, even Messinahoff, as an example, we're a substantial winery in the marketplace, but that only makes up about 30% of my revenues. So most of my sales are from the hospitality sides of our businesses, and there's also a major restaurant portion. Texas wineries also have restaurants as we do as well.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, do you have any comments or questions for Mr. Bonarigo?
I do have a quick question. Do you know if any of the wineries are using the opportunity to utilize the SBA loans at all to help with some of the expenses?
They absolutely are, and that's actually been something, the information flow has been very helpful. We've pushed it out to our members for whether that be the SBA programs, for either the loans or the grants. Obviously, many of our members are definitely taking advantage of those things, and I know this is more of a federal thing, but there is also still a lot of fear about what the results of those are going to be in terms of the loan forgiveness and everything, because once again, additional debt is always a concern for the long-term health of the business.
Okay, thank you very much.
Piggybacking on that, I've seen a lot in media that some of the loans or the monies from these programs aren't making it out the door as fast as I think some people would have liked. Do you have any background on the ability or the progress on getting that small business, that money from the CARES Act?
In terms of a specific percentage of wineries, I don't know. I do know that I've spoken to many, and pretty much everyone that I have spoken to has applied. In terms of who has actually been approved and or funded, that's a very small number at this point. It really comes down to the lenders. We had a particular lender that, we had some challenges being able to get some financing up front, but actually the amazing thing about this from our perspective, local communities have been so supportive. Actually, local banks have been more helpful than your larger national banks in this situation.
Right. Chairman, I really like his idea on the tax rebate and grant program that promotes Texas purchasing. I think looking at supply chains, both, globally, national, as well as statewide, is going to be something moving forward that I think legislators are going to want to look at. And to the extent that we can help in doing the research for that and moving something forward, I'd like to be involved in that. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, Commissioner Mack, I concur with that. I think that's an innovative thought. And the other thing that, Paul, is evident with you, and I think is so special about our industry, is the multi-generational aspect of our businesses. And the fact that your business started, I guess, with your father or uncle, 40 years ago. We have some industries that are 5 generations old. These are family businesses. And the protection of these family businesses is so vital and so important, not just for our industry, but for the state of Texas as a whole. And so I applaud the innovation that all of you as businessmen and women are having to go through to deal with this difficult time. And it's an honor for us to be shoulder to shoulder with you in this fight, because we're going to get through this fight. So thank you, Paul. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, sir.
Mike Cameron is here live, president of Texas Distilled Spirits Association. Can I say Devil River? Are we allowed to give a prop there?
Plural, Devil's River.
Devil, sorry.
Thank you.
One of our fine spirit manufacturers. Thank you for being here, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate the invitation, and General Nettles and the rest of the entire TABC team. I'm here on behalf of the Texas Distillers Association. And my name is Mike Cameron. As you mentioned, I'm the president of the Texas Distilled Spirits Association. We have 160 distilled spirits permits in the state of Texas. And I've listened to what everyone is talking about today, and it sounds like everyone has been affected by this in a big way. And I think we've probably been affected the worst. And what I mean by that is we're the youngest industry, and we have so many members that are brand new just getting into this industry, and I'm getting calls daily. And
a lot of veterans.
A lot of veterans. They're worried about surviving. Having success in any business is about having access to customers. And quite frankly, we don't have access to very many right now. Myself and our members have complete respect for the 3-tier system. Our distributor partners are fantastic. They help us move product around the state. Our Texas Package Store relationship, we couldn't be in business without their support and supporting Texas brands. So it's not really about that. It's more about the current climate that we're in. These are extraordinary times, and our members are hurting. And because we don't have the ability to ship product, we don't have the ability, 100% of the tasting rooms across Texas at distilleries are closed currently. So there are no tasting rooms open. So all the customers that were coming in on the weekends, it's non-existent. We do appreciate the Governor Abbott's efforts to allow curb service to our distilleries. As far as how our members have been affected individually, it's kind of all over the map. As I mentioned, most of them are small. So we talked earlier about the PPP benefit. Because they had a low amount of payroll, they didn't really have a large benefit because it's tied directly to payroll. So with that being said, I think all of our members have applied, but for the most part, it's not going to be meaningful dollars to help them survive. What's going to help us survive is support and being able to sell our products. As you know, Governor Abbott allowed restaurants to deliver distilled spirits in a 375 milliliter bottle. But unfortunately, this allowance has done little for Texas distilleries because less than 20% of our members have the small bottle. And we could adjust probably quickly, but the bottle inventories are stressed right now because of the hand sanitizer issue. Of course, the tasting rooms are closed, and Texas distillers are currently sitting on millions of dollars worth of inventory that they just can't sell out of their facilities. And that's tied up a lot of capital, whether it's bottles, closures, liquid, and the labor to put all that together. And they have contracts with vendors that are being stressed and not being able to keep up with their obligations. We conducted a survey recently of our members, Texas distillers, and they are currently facing an estimated 80 to 90% loss in revenue during this pandemic. That's staggering. In times of disaster, we like to talk about what we're trying to do to help our communities. In times of disaster, there's been a lot in the media about what our members have been able to do, and Texas distillers have really stepped up in a big way. I'm sure you've seen the news coverage about distillers producing the hand sanitizer and surface sanitizers. Governor Abbott announced the state's disaster declaration on Friday, March 13th, and by the following Sunday, distillers throughout Texas were manufacturing hand sanitizers to distribute to first responders, healthcare workers, and our military, and the general public. And I'm proud to say that, nationwide, there's about 600 distilleries producing hand sanitizer, and 60 of those 600 are from Texas. So it's not just a few, it's a lot. And some of them are selling it, but a lot of our members, most of them are donating it to help this need. We're fielding calls daily to provide hand sanitizer to the market. So we're trying to do our part to help. It's not an easy feat. There were a number of federal regulations that had to be waived and many federal agencies that had to provide guidance. The change in FDA requirements had created a shortage of raw materials for sanitizer that is increasing costs exponentially. Some distillers may be forced to stop producing sanitizer soon if they cannot recover costs through some sales of their product. Distillers have faced problems finding bottles and containers to use for hand sanitizers. Most distillers are not charging for these hand sanitizers. I think that's really important to mention. They're trying to help, but instead they're making them free to help our fellow Texans. Because the restaurant industry is a great partner of the Texas distillers, we have many distillers that are donating a portion of the bottle sales, the minimum bottle sales that they're having, to charities for supporting waiters and bartenders, and just simply making cash donations. As an industry, Texas distilleries have already raised several $1 million to help Texas bars and restaurants across the state. And I'm very proud of that fact that we're trying to help one of our customers here, and that is supporting the restaurants and bars at this time. The Texas Still Spirits Association and the Texas Whiskey Association are using a hashtag StillStrongTexas, or StillStrongTX, to highlight the efforts of Texas distillers that are making to help their communities during COVID-19 pandemic. As long as there's a state disaster declaration, the following is a list of things that we are going to be requesting during this public health disaster. And I know that the TABC is a regulatory body, and I get that and understand that, and our members understand that, but we are needing help, and we are needing relief quick. I'm estimating that we could lose 40% of our distillers if this doesn't clear up soon. And that survey is from our members. One of the things that we'd like to request or ask for during this time is that these are temporary. Again, I want to be clear. This is just during the pandemic. This isn't something we're asking to change the law on. This is just temporary relief. Would be a waiver on the 30-day limit. And what I mean by that is we request flexibility in the number of bottles that are sold at a distillery. Texas distilleries are limited to selling 2 bottles to the same individual every 30 days. Distilleries have loyal customers who want to help ensure their favorite distilleries remain open by purchasing more than 2 bottles every month. We ask that you waive the 30-day requirement to allow an individual to purchase more bottles during this public health crisis. And again, I want to be clear, we're not asking to go over the limit. We have a limit of 3,500 gallons, but we're just asking to temporarily waive the 30-day 2 bottles per person per limit. List the 375 limit. We are grateful for the order allowing restaurants to deliver cocktail kits to Texas consumers, which will help some of our restaurant partners remain open. This allowance does little to help Texas distilleries because of the limitation on the bottle size, as I mentioned earlier. This means the vast majority of Texas distilleries are not benefiting from restaurant deliveries. We ask that you lift the 375 ml or less restrictions and allow restaurants to deliver 750 ml bottles. Allowing for the delivery of standard 750 ml bottle will help restaurants alleviate their bottle inventory and will also give Texas distillers the opportunity to compete with larger distilleries that distribute smaller bottles. Allow distillers to deliver spirits within their county. As you know, package stores may deliver distilled spirits within the city or county in which they are located. During this time of quarantine, we are grateful that our retail partners, through their own employees or through third-party delivery apps, are permitted to deliver alcohol. Because Texas distillers can also sell distilled spirits from their distilleries, we ask that distillers also be granted the authority to deliver their products within the county in which their distillery is located. This allows distillers to shift employees' duties from manning tasting rooms to delivering bottles, saving jobs. Allow third-party delivery services to deliver products from distillery. Texas consumers now more than ever are utilizing third-party apps like Drizzly, Saucy, Minibar, Instacart to have distilled spirits delivered to their homes. I read an article last week that sales at Drizzly are up 1,200%. Consumers are shifting how they're purchasing. Obviously, they don't have a choice. Temporarily allowing these third parties to pick up distilled spirits at the distillery and deliver them to Texas consumers at home will provide revenue to distilleries, which cannot currently make any revenue because of the closures of their tasting rooms. Lastly, we are asking for temporary relief to be able to deliver or ship spirits. And this is a big ask on our part, but desperate times call for desperate measures, and if we aren't able to sell, we will not survive. And I'm very proud of our members, both large and small. These are hardworking family businesses that are trying to eke out an existence right now, and we do get great support from our distributors. We do get great support from the Texas Package Store Association. But right now, consumers' habits are changing. They're going into a package store not to browse. They're going in to buy a staple item that they're familiar with, and they're getting out of there. They don't want to, get a virus. They're also doing curb service. So they're ordering brands that they know. Having access to these customers is very important. How we access customers as small distillers in Texas is we do tastings at package stores, and we're grateful for the package stores allowing us to do those tastings. But we can't do those now either. We're not allowed to be in those stores presenting our products. So it's just becoming very, very difficult for members to access these customers. And like I said, we're very appreciative of all the support we've been getting from the other tiers, but we pooled together as members, and I surveyed our members and asked them, what ideas do you guys have? What do you want me to present? And that's what I'm here doing on behalf of our members. So with that, I'll open it up for any questions you may have.
Commissioners, do you have any comments or questions for Mike?
No, I would just like to say I really appreciate you coming and bringing these issues to us today. And it's a lot of consideration on our part that will be given to this.
Thank you.
Yeah, so, Mike, we really appreciate it, and we know that you guys are struggling, and you are very much an entrepreneurial part of the industry, and we've always beer manufacturers, distillers, even some folks in the wine industry are heavily dominated by young veterans who leave the military and go into your industry. So it's near and dear to my heart personally, and so we appreciate your efforts and wish you all the best.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Okay, next we have via conference Emily Knight, who is President and CEO of the Texas Restaurant Association.
Hey.
Ms. Knight, you have the floor.
Great. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you just fine. Thank you.
Excellent. So I thought it'd be appropriate today, if you can go to the next slide for me, to maybe just take us back even a month ago and remind everyone of the size and scale of this industry in Texas. So before the crisis began, we finished 2019 with almost 50,000 eating and drinking establishments across the state. We had $70 billion in sales, which is a massive contribution to the state of Texas when it comes to taxes. And of course, we employed almost 1.4 million people. As you look at on the right-hand side, I think as we go into what we look like today, which is in one word, catastrophic in comparison to before, you can see that we take almost 51% of the food dollars spent in the state. And so when we sort of hit this pandemic and supported the governor's decision in the name of public health, what you really have experienced across the board, and you heard my colleagues speak before me, is a complete disruption of the supply chain, both food and beverage. To give you a look across the nation, while we're 10% of the employment in the state, which is the second highest of the private sector, we have over 1 million locations. We had $863 billion in sales last year, and we employed 15.6 million people. And so for the first time ever, our industry is not only experiencing something for the first time in Texas, but my colleagues that sit in every state are experiencing the exact same impact. So if we go to the next slide, I want to give you a look at what it looks like today. I'm going to also bring you up to date because some of this data is now 2 weeks old. And one of the hardest parts about living through this crisis is that every day these numbers continue to grow and not in a positive way. So in the first 3 weeks, we lost over 200,000 jobs in Texas. That has now crossed 350,000 jobs. Those are real people, those are real lives. If you look down below, in just the first week, it was 1.8 billion lost in sales. And 64% of our restaurants have laid off individuals. Roughly 58% expected to do that even more, and 69% of operators have reduced their hours of their employees. We know now at this point, in many cases, reporting across the entire state of Texas, we have more than 75% to 85% of our restaurants have laid off majority of their staff and are keeping skeleton crews. I'll talk about the PPP in a second because we've been very deep in those discussions with our federal congressional delegation, and maybe just add a little bit of insight to maybe where it's falling short. In the first 3 weeks, we also saw about 60% of our restaurants convert to what we call off-premise. Now, let me imagine changing your business model, some cases in 48 hours, from being a sit-down restaurant to having to engage delivery third-party companies or perhaps your own, to have new guidelines put on you about how you can actually interact with the customers that do come in for curbside or drive-through, and then do all of that while you're navigating massive loss. And remember, our industry typically, if on a good day, maybe a 10% margin business. So our margins are already so narrowly thin. And it was a Herculean effort by this industry. And I can tell you what I'm so proud of is our members stepped up. They stepped up in ways that you can't imagine, doing online tequila tastings, online wine tastings, delivering curbside, putting packages of food together for individuals. They are doing everything they can, and it's just to survive. And I think we have to remember that. And I especially want to call out Commissioner Boatwright, because in the last commission meeting, I think he tried to bring the connection that these are not just businesses. These are people, their children in our schools, there are many small business owners. And, I think we've never seen anything like this, but just as we have always gone to them for fundraisers and baseball games and weddings and more, I think now this industry and this sector needs all of us, and they need the federal and state government and all of the authorities to sort of step up and make sure to get us through this. So if we talk about on the next slide, and actually stay here for just a second, because someone had mentioned earlier, and as each of my colleagues spoke, I realized you can sort of see how many of them feed into the restaurant themselves. And so when we aren't opening or our capacity is significantly reduced, it impacts everyone, even down to our friends in farming and ranching. So we did a couple things immediately. So first and foremost, and I want to call out Jared Staples directly, because I'm sure in the early days of the crisis, he was probably simply tired of getting my phone calls. But we knew we could switch that delivery bill, or at least get something palatable that was also safe. And working with him and the governor's office, we were able to get that waiver for curbside, and that saved quite a few restaurants that were on the brink of closing. We then realized that there was a shortage in our grocery stores, and that in many cases we had a lot of our population that was nervous about going into a crowded space. So we went back to the governor's office and again talked about the idea of converting essentially 50,000 restaurants into retail outlets. So to work with our grocer partners and bring some of the essentials, so maybe a customer has to go out just one time. So now you have, with the retail waiver that the governor was the first in the nation to pass, our restaurants could start to get that supply chain moving. So you can go to your County Line Barbecue in Austin and take a box that maybe has milk, bread, eggs, pasta, and they'll put it in the trunk of your car. So it's contactless, it's more revenue for the restaurant. They can put a bottle of wine in, more revenue for the restaurant, good for the consumer, and it's safe. So those two things were things we did right away. We then went back to the governor's office and talked about the SNAP benefit program. Texas is currently not a restaurant meals program, but we feel strongly that why should someone on SNAP benefits go to the grocery store and maybe not get the meal they want and not have access to restaurant food? And so we're currently in that process, and the governor filed that with the FNS in DC, and we're waiting just to see if we get approval, but that would be just another way to bring a consumer to a restaurant and have them be able to use dollars to try to keep our restaurants open. If you go down a little bit, I think another thing that was very important to us, and you heard this mentioned a lot, was around taxes. Liquidity is key right now. We don't run on high margins and you have liquidity issues. In general, having to front a lot of expenses is very challenging. So we work with the comptroller's office, and we're able to have the comptroller ask our members to file their taxes as they should, but then call an emergency hotline number. And what we've been reported is that our comptroller and his team are working hand in hand to try to put plans together that would keep these restaurants that can still run solvent until we get through this crisis. Two other things we decided to do is we're a membership-driven organization. That's essentially how we are able to operate. But when this began, we realized that, and many of my colleagues have shared this, there is such a desperate need for correct information. So we made a decision as a leadership team to open up all of our information. So our members-only app, our members-only content on the website, we took all the passwords off, and anyone in the state of Texas that operates in the restaurant sector can come to us for information. I think, it's one of those decisions, it's just the right thing to do, and we believe the value we're creating will help drive membership in the long run. And I think the last thing we did, which I'm so proud of because we're just about to get to the $2 million mark, but we were asked by a lot of people if we could set up a relief fund. And many relief funds are going to the employees, which really matter. We really thought that if we had healthy businesses, we could then have lots of employees working. So we set up the Texas Restaurant Relief Fund, or TX Relief Fund. And even two of my colleagues here, the wholesale beer distributors and Republic National distributors, have contributed over $160,000 when their own businesses are hurting. And so that money is going out to independent restaurants in Texas. And I can tell you, when you're an independent restaurant that gets a $4,000 or $5,000 grant, and you can keep employees on the books for 2 more weeks, it's incredibly meaningful. So I want to thank both of them and anyone else maybe who's listening that has contributed, because it's a real win. So if we talk about real quick the federal side, the CARES Act, I was incredibly hopeful for the CARES Act. But to give one data point, on Friday we launched a survey across our membership. More than 700 restaurants responded to their questions about the CARES Act. And when you get that kind of response that quickly, at least in our segment, maybe there's an issue. And it was clear that, as someone mentioned, many of the big banks are not participating. So Wells Fargo, M&T, Capital One, and many of our owners and operators, those are who they bank with. They then go to all the regional or community banks in their area, and they can't be serviced because they're not their customer. So we've been working hand in hand with Senator Cornyn and Senator Cruz and our different congressional delegation members to ask for 3 key fixes on this program, because, as someone said, 8 weeks of coverage of payroll, rent, mortgage, and utilities will not be enough. After Harvey, it took us 18 months, 54 counties, 18 months to get back to pre-sales levels. This could be that long or longer. And so we've got to continue to look at how we're going to get restaurants and our partners back through, I think, what's going to be a very long journey. And so that takes me to the last slide, and that is around.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you? That's a very important point. Can you say that one more time, please? What you just said.
Sure. Yeah. So after we were trying to measure. We've been asked a lot of questions, even from the governor's office, on kind of relief, right? What is it going to take? And we have a lot of ideas, but the only thing we could measure in Houston, that was the most, in Texas, which was the most recent, was Harvey. And that really impacted about 54 counties in some way. And it was 18 months until those restaurants saw pre-Harvey levels of sales. And so that's a long recovery. And in some cases, this is going to be much longer because the outage period has been much more significant. And so we are deeply concerned that if the relief is front-ended only, that you're going to lose many more than we're estimating now. At least 35% of our restaurants may not make it through this crisis. And many of those are not your big chains. They're your independents that are the lifeblood of the community that they serve in. And so we need to really be thoughtful about how we get these restaurants restarted. Because if we don't, all of my colleagues that spoke before you are also incredibly impacted. And so we're the nucleus. And so I think we just have to understand that some people envision on July 1st, lots of people eating and drinking in a restaurant. And we don't see that. We think consumer spending will be very challenged. And we think that the idea of being in crowded places psychologically could be a challenge for us. And so we've got a long road ahead.
Mr. Chairman.
That's an extraordinary presentation.
Well, and you know what though, but I'm not done. I'm not done. Can I just make my one ask?
Sure.
So I have to, right? And I would be remiss, and I know it is not your purview, but I'm going to say it anyway because I think it's important. But if I got one call a day, I get 1,000 a day about margaritas to go. I'm not going to talk about that because I know it's a governor's decision. However, my colleagues brought this up. I do think that we need to be thoughtful about our craft brewers and our distillers. And one of the things we've talked about is we would be more than willing as a restaurant community to put growlers in the curbside or delivery, or frankly, just for delivery, but to get the craft beer moving or any beer moving in a growler. The second is around the distillers. This idea that we know that also because of our curbside move, the bottle size that's currently going out, they're running out of them. And so the option to go to the 750 makes a lot of sense to us. And so I just want to say is that ask was made as the restaurant that would have to distribute them. We are fully supportive of both of those requests. And I think this request here is critically important. And that's why we wanted to bring it before you, which is we have a lot of restaurants that are closed or a lot of restaurants that are operating on skeleton crews in order to leverage their PPP benefits. And right now they can't essentially sell that back unless it was for a canceled event. And so we would just really kindly request a relaxing of the regulation for MB or mixed beverage permit holders to sell back their unused alcohol to distributors. And I think that would also help with a cash situation or revenue situation. And we've seen a number of states do it, including Michigan just last night, pass this waiver. And what it would do is help all the restaurants that are sitting on a tremendous amount of product that they either can dump down the drain, right, if they close, or if they're closed for a period of time, have some type of opportunity to generate and return. And so that would be one thing we believe is in the commission's purview that we would kindly ask. And then on the right-hand side is really just back about cash flow. And that is any temporary suspension of licensing fees, renewal fees, alcohol excise tax would just help us a lot right now. If you could just, and we've been doing more and more of releasing letters from these owners and operators, this is something that we have never seen. And if we don't lean in really deeply, we will lose the restaurant sector in Texas. And I think we don't even want to imagine what that might look like. So that's my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Go ahead. Commissioners, comments and or questions, please proceed.
Mr. Chairman, I wanted to ask one question, and it goes back to the survey that you received from the 700 restaurant owners. Did you have a question in that survey that kind of shined a light on whether the banks are using credit as a basis for the decision to push the money out? Can you speak on that at all? Because I believe the CARES Act, this is a grant, a forgiveness loan, a forgivable loan. So when I hear credit-based decisions being put into that, it doesn't seem like it comports with what the intent of the legislation was.
Yeah, and so the original intent of the CARES Act was really to keep people working, right? It was to keep Americans working. And I think that was really done, and it was great intent, but it was really done at a time when we expected, remember Easter was on Sunday, we thought we'd be back in business today with some of the original logic. And so when that sort of didn't occur, where the breakdown is you sort of have three elements that businesses are considering. One is the economic injury disaster loan. And we're seeing those go out for about 25 to 35,000, although the limit is at 2 million. And that's for 30 years at a 4% or 3.75 interest rate. And so for some of our smaller businesses, that's a great option, but it does come with those financial tests, which make it harder for some businesses to participate. Then you take the PPP loan, and one of the advantages was for banks was to be able to process very quickly. There's no credit elsewhere test, there's no personal guarantee, and there's no collateral required. And so when someone says it's about credit, I don't actually believe that's true. I think what's happening is banks and some of our community banks, one bank here in North Texas has 14,000 applications. They have 3 lenders. You can just imagine how long this is going to take to process through. What I do believe could be happening is banks are prioritizing their customers. They may not let any other customers in. And when you look at their customers, they may be prioritizing the largest loans first, because of course there is a fee in this for them. Can only comment on what we're hearing from the market, but I think the bigger risk is in some of your small communities across Texas, if there's not an SBA lender, they have to go find someone else. And because about one of the survey points was about 65% are going through small banks. So they're overloaded. They're not going to take new customers. And if you're sitting, for example, in Forney, Texas, was a call I received this morning, they can't find a lender. And so we've been trying to find alternatives. I know we've been desperately lobbying our elected officials to help either expand or create a new mechanism for this financial delivery. But you have a lot of people waiting, a lot of people who have been able to apply. And some of the folks, because there is no pain threshold, is probably not an academic word, but there is no measure of how much pain you've been in. You have some folks in my mind that have done quite well through this because they're a small business. They're also been able to participate in that money. And so I'm very concerned. I know Congress is going to meet again Thursday, potentially to increase this funding, but we've got to find a way to push this money down to these individual business owners.
Thank you, Commissioner Mack. Other questions or comments from the commissioners? Ms. Knight, thank you very much. That's an extraordinary presentation. And what it does for me and hopefully for all of us is recognize that perhaps unique amongst industries, the alcoholic beverage industry is its own ecosystem. Everyone is tied together. And what impacts one might impact the other. And I heard somebody equate it to sort of like a living organism, like a tree, whether you're the trunk or the leaves or the branch, and further out you go, the more fragile you are, which I think is evidenced by the monumental numbers that you're describing, 35, 40% of your industry perhaps failing completely. So the fragility of the restaurants is acute. And I think what I'd like, and I think that all of us should be mindful of, and I would hope that industry would continue to press upon this, is the disastrous effect of continuing to be shut. And I know we have to weigh human lives, we have to weigh medical research, but also the impact on 35% potentially of restaurants in Texas going out of business, 40% of distillers going out of business, 10% beer man. I mean, when the numbers add up, let's take away the percentage and start applying that to human lives, to human beings, to families, and the great burden that government is going to have to try to solve this. So, you know, as we sort of sit and look at models and curves and statistical analysis, we have to step back and look at human beings being impacted by these decisions. And so you know, Emily, I really feel for you. Like all of us, we know plenty of people in Houston that are in the restaurant business. I know Chris Shepard is doing yeoman's work to try to help your industry, but you know, he's got a number of restaurants that are high-end restaurants that are, you know, folks aren't attending. And so those are daunting numbers, and we're going to do everything we can as an agency to help to the extent that we can help. And this is where people like Jared Staples and his work with all of you in the industry is paying off, I hope, at least as a sympathetic and empathetic ear. So gosh, I very much appreciate your time today and your testimony. Next, we have our last industry representative is Charles Valhenrat, Executive Director of the Texas Craft Brewers Guild, last but certainly not least by video conference. And Charles, I think I probably butchered your last name, so I apologize, but you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Chairman Lilly. Actually, you did quite well with the name, so I appreciate it. Thank you to all the commissioners. Thank you, General Nettles and his staff, for giving us this opportunity to talk with you today. We greatly appreciate it. As many have mentioned, Jared Staples, Thomas Graham, so many on the TABC executive team have been incredibly helpful and responsive to all of our questions and needs, and we greatly appreciate that during this really unprecedented time. The Texas Craft Brewers Guild represents small and independent craft breweries throughout the state. We have over 300 members, and we represent breweries that have been open for 20 years to breweries that opened several months ago. And we also represent entrepreneurs who are planning to open breweries in the future. We want to make sure we're able to represent what our current members need and what we will need going forward. We surveyed our operating members to determine how the COVID-19 crisis is impacting them. And frankly, the results are fairly dire. On average, our members have seen a 71% decline in revenue since the beginning of the crisis. This ties closely with a broader, more statistically significant national survey of craft brewers that shows sales down 75% across the country. We believe our number is actually probably closer to that number. Our members effectively have 4 primary channels to market: packaged beer, sold through grocery and package stores; draft beer, sold through on-site retail accounts; their own tap rooms for on-premise consumption; and of course, luckily, beer to go that was enacted last September. Since the beginning of this crisis, draft beer and tap rooms have virtually gone to zero, leaving breweries to rely on beer to go, along with the package stores, the packaged beer, sold through grocery stores and package stores. So while we hear national stories about how beer sales are up during this crisis, peeling back the onion a little reveals that the sales increases are driven by bulk buying of large format offerings of core brands from national breweries. As someone mentioned earlier, there's not an opportunity to go and peruse a store aisle. You have to know what you want going in. So the default tends to be the larger known brands. Many of our members do not sell packaged beer at all. In fact, 40% say they do not utilize this channel. So they've been relying on previously on the draft beer and their tap rooms, and those channels have really dried up. Of course, our members are resilient. Many have done what they can to shift product to what packaging formats they can. This includes hand bottling beer, contracting with mobile canning companies to get beer into formats that can be delivered to the generous retail chains that are willing to take these new packaging. And we greatly appreciate that willingness and that opportunity from those partners. And of course, many of our members are having to educate themselves on the label approval process, since they previously didn't sell this beer outside of their own tap room. Now they're going through the label approving process, and we applaud the TABC's ongoing improvements in that area and the current turnaround time, which is allowing breweries to get this beer to market. Unfortunately, despite the resilience and resourcefulness, 63% of our members have already laid off or furloughed employees. And actually that was from a time point of about a week to a week and a half ago. Unfortunately, that number may have increased by this period. Of those that have reduced staff, they have reduced it by typically 65%. So the impact is significant. One bright spot for breweries right now is their access to beer-to-go sales. 90% of our members are using curbside beer-to-go sales to maintain at least some cash flow and employ what team members they can. We're thankful for the efforts to include beer-to-go in the recent TABC Sunset Bill. Without that access to market, the damage to our industry, the specific craft beer industry, would be irreparable based on this crisis. We do anticipate that this will have a long-term effect on our members. Based on the national survey that I mentioned earlier, respondents were asked to categorize how long they could maintain their companies while the current social distancing measures are in place. Craft breweries in general are small, highly leveraged businesses with large initial capital outlay and slim ongoing margins. So there is an obvious, impact and analysis that has to be done to see how long your business can maintain itself. Of those that replied to the survey, just under 12% thought that their breweries could last 4 weeks. We are past the 4-week mark. Governor Abbott signed the emergency declaration on March 13th. Based on that, and based on the number of breweries that we calculate in the state of Texas, there will be 40 breweries or so that close any day now. If the crisis continues and the social distancing measures that are in place go on, many up to additional 45% of our brewery members thought that they would not be able to maintain their business. Unfortunately, that calculates to potentially 150 breweries in the state of Texas closing before the end of this summer. So obviously a very dire situation, but I will say that something that's always impressed me by our members is their passion for the business. I was talking to a member recently that is actually in the process of closing his business, and talked to him about what he would do next. And he said, well, maybe I'll open up a small brewery, just to demonstrate that, that's a strange answer, but it's about his passion for craft beer. And we believe that that will keep this industry going after this crisis. The people are just involved in this business because they really appreciate what they're doing and how they can serve their community. So with that, I once again want to thank General Nettles and his staff, and we'll open it up to questions.
Thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions for Charles or comments?
Chairman, I've got a question. Charles, you mentioned that the breweries are several months old to 20 years old, which 20 years is still relatively young for a business. So it seems to me that much like the Texas distilleries, which they talked about, they're very young businesses. That makes it much more difficult for the craft breweries to navigate this process as a young business.
Absolutely. The number of breweries that are more than double-digit old, more than 10 years old, I can count on two hands. I would say the vast majority of our members are less than 5 years old. In fact, when I joined the Guild in 2012, our total membership was 40, and now we're, about the state sees 340 or more breweries. This is a young industry. Their initial capital outlay is recent and not taken care of yet. So yes, this is a significant impact on these small businesses.
Well, there's been a number of ideas brought up to assist with these Texas manufacturers, the Texas distilleries, and the Texas craft breweries, supported by the Texas Restaurant Association, and we will certainly be taking all those into consideration. As Chairman Lilly has mentioned several times, we are limited in everything that we can do, but that we can do, we will certainly take a look at.
We greatly appreciate that, and echo the comments from our fellow colleagues that talked about tax relief opportunities. Anything to improve cash flow during this period is greatly appreciated.
I want to echo what Commissioner Atkins said, and I want to add another comment. I hope y'all don't think this is inappropriate, but this has been a terrible time for everybody. It's probably less hard on me and my family than it is on a lot of the people who are listening to this meeting for various reasons. But one of the things that has been good about this time are little things like going to do curbside pickup at restaurants with my daughter, and taking my dog and going to a craft brewery where I live in Dallas and picking up as much beer as I can, and doing that as much as I can. And after this meeting, I'm gonna grab him and we're gonna do the same thing, and we're gonna tip as much as we can, and we're gonna keep doing that. In this very difficult time, that's been some consolation, being able to go out and buy things from your industry, talk at a distance with your employees, and I just want to encourage anybody who's watching this to spend the dollars that you still have helping the industries that we regulate. And I want to thank you in particular for what you're doing in your industry, and to let you know that I've gotten particular enjoyment from going and getting beer from y'all during this time. So
I greatly appreciate that, Commissioner Boatwright, and glad you were able to get some beer. That's fantastic.
Charles, thank you very much. Thank you for all of our industry experts who've been here, our industry leaders. I know it's been sort of been a long morning, but you've been heard loud and clear, and I encourage you all to continue to do so. And not just at our level, but to the extent that all of you live in communities, and as you know, the respective communities have varying degrees of influence from their county judges, from their mayors. And so I'm hopeful, and I do believe, that all of you are impressing upon your local governments these statistics, the dire state of this industry, and that message is not just heard at the state level, but it's also heard at the county and the city level, which I know you all are doing, and I hope you will continue to do so. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for all your valuable comments. In the interest of time, we're going to take a brief recess of 5 minutes before we go into public comment. So the time now is 12:49, and we are in recess for approximately 5 minutes. All right, ladies and gentlemen, time is 12:56. We are back in open session. And at this time, we will now be taking public comment on agenda items from today's meeting. If you wish to comment on any of these items, please use the chat feature. Detailed instructions for using the chat feature to comment are posted on our agency website. We'll now wait to see if any items are received. While we're waiting on that, I wanted to bring up an interesting point. I had the opportunity to have a teleconference with Scott McClellan, who's the president of HEB, and the comment about Harvey came up, and what was different is that, you know, as he said, during Harvey, we didn't really have any issues because we could get supplies from Atlanta or other cities that were not impacted by the hurricane, whereas now the entire nation, indeed the whole world, is impacted, and so the supply chains are certainly disrupted, and it's a different metric, a different template, a different formula, a different model, one that nobody has really ever dealt with. So the innovation that everyone in this industry is having to go through is laudable.
Okay, we've got some public comments. This is Ashley Healy, Deputy General Counsel. Our first comment was from Deborah Richardson, and she just said that I want to thank y'all for keeping the public and local jurisdictions informed. We then had some comments in response to the question about who was doing hand sanitizer, and Spencer Whalen said there are several: Maverick Whiskey Company, Ranger Creek, Emma Men said Ranger Creek, and Vicki Thomas from the San Antonio Council on Alcohol and Drug Awareness said that Dorcold Distillery is making hand sanitizer, and then Spencer Whalen linked to a list of those that make hand sanitizer. Another public comment we received from Amy Harrison, owner of Amy Harrison Consulting and director of TABLS, said, big thanks to the licensing division, specifically the processors working from home, for their continued support to the licensing services and current applicants. And then we received another public comment from Wendy Turk /FinTech, and then in parentheses says electronic payments between alcohol wholesalers and retailers. And she said, I just want to say a sincere thank you to hosting these meetings online and for lining up an invaluable list of stakeholders to provide updates from their respective member groups. Well done, TABC. And that is all we received today.
Very good. Thank you for these comments. Thank you for your support, and we'll proceed to the next agenda item. The next agenda item is executive session, and at this time I'd like to poll my commissioners to see if we've had one depart, if we need to go into executive session, and if we do, we are set up here to be able to do so and comply with proper social distancing. So, commissioners, any thoughts on that, please? Okay. Having heard none, that we will refrain from moving into executive session. And with that, the next is the announcement of the next meeting date. The next regular scheduled commission meeting date is planned for Tuesday, May 19th. Commissioners, do you have a problem with that date? Having heard none, obviously at this point, we do not know whether we will have to conduct that meeting remotely, as we have the last two, or we will be able to meet together. So please stand by, both public and members of the agency. But I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time today. It's been a long day. We've had a lot of valuable information. Great kudos to industry members for sharing your time and your thoughts. And we wish all of you the best. And we'll talk to you next meeting. Thank you.
Please call the time.
I'm sorry, the time is, we are now concluded, and the time is 1:01. We are adjourned.